My name is J.C. Webb. I am the CEO and managing member of REMTERRA. REMTERRA is a real estate and project development company. And I told Lynn, obviously I'm not from around here. I don't know if anyone's picked up on that. I don't sound like I'm from around here. However, I was in Detroit about 15 years ago. It was a great trip. Picked up a wife. It was fantastic. In all reality, though, my wife's family is from Waterford. It's about 20 minutes up the road. So we've been married 15 years now. We've got 3 beautiful kids that when they're poorly behaved, I understand that they behave like me. So I guess I am regretting my raising, so to speak. I am a practicing attorney. I am a real estate and corporate attorney. And as Lynn said, we're gonna talk about conservation easements just a little bit. And I apologize. I'm going to try to stay kind of front and center stage, but I'm accustomed to walking while I talk, so I'm really going to try to stay planted here. But let's jump right into it. So I'm going to start off with an example we're probably all familiar with, and just show of hands here, who here has ever been to a national park? Show of hands. National park, national monument, something like that. Okay, so it looks like everyone. So we're familiar. We can see in our minds kind of what our mind's eye, what that looks like. In our nation, in the late 1800s, we began talking about, as a collective body, we began talking about conservation. We began talking about natural resources and what would be there, what would be left for the generations to come. And in 1916, Congress passed the National Park Service Organic Act, which created the National Park Service. Today, the National Park Service manages a touch over 85 million acres in the United States. The Park Service does that at a price point of about $4 billion a year. So we're taking care of a whole lot of land with a whole lot of money. That's what we understand as the public version of conservation. We're going to talk about the private version of conservation, and that's conservation easements and the donation of property to qualified conservancies. In the late 70s, 1976, 77, conservation easements first made their appearance in the tax code. In 1980, conservation easements were permanently entered into the tax code under Section 170H as a charitable donation. So for an individual, if you choose as a property owner to donate either your property as a whole or to donate easement restrictions upon your property to a qualified conservancy, you're entitled to a tax deduction beginning in 1980. In 2015, Congress and the IRS provided a little more incentive. Prior to that time, conservation easement donations as a charitable donation pretty well followed our other capital donations. However, in 2015, the numbers were bumped up. The donation was allowed to carry forward for a total of 15 years from the date of donation, and the cap for the tax deduction was increased from 30% to 50% of AGI for the individual investor. It was around this same time that this idea of syndication of these deals became popular. Now, I will tell you in full transparency, the IRS doesn't like deductions. I don't know if that is news to anyone here. It's not news down in Alabama. The IRS hates deductions because the IRS loves to collect tax revenue. So this idea that we have a syndicated project that we're entitled to deduct up to 50% of an individual's adjusted gross income from ordinary income is a pretty hot topic with the IRS. There's a whole lot of information there, a lot of misinformation, a lot of rumors, but also a lot of news, so to speak, that's coming out. But today I want to talk about, and I've been tasked with, what is the ESG regarding conservation easements and conservation in general. And I just want to do this by kind of going through a case study. As I said earlier, I'm a practicing attorney. I represent developers, I represent builders, I represent timber companies, anyone that's really involved in real estate in any way in Central Alabama. I'm probably either representing them or I have someone connected to them. One of my clients, this would have been about 6 years ago now, brought a project to us, and they were approached with this deal, so to speak. Turns out it was a conservation easement. We had not seen one prior to that. We had kind of heard about them, but we had not seen one. We looked through the deal, we discussed it with all of the principals in the firm, and we decided that this would be a good decision from a business perspective for this particular home builder. This particular home builder at the time was about the 10th or 11th largest Alabama-based residential builder. Over the years, and following that initial decision, our principals have invested in 4 different deals. The substantive effect has been this: they are now the largest Alabama home builder in the state. And here's why. The IRS and everyone likes to talk about the individual tax deduction, that big number, that 50%. But let's talk about the mechanics and what that actually means for the business. What that means for a small to medium-sized business is that the individual principals in the business, if they are able right off the top to take a deduction for 50% of their ordinary income, then those are tax draws that do not need to be taken out of the business. And because that deduction can be taken in the year in which that project closes, then it's almost immediately. You're talking within 6 months. So if we were to close a project today, come April, when we get ready to file our individual returns, and for some of these folks, it may be all the way out to July, maybe even October, but when they get ready to file their individual returns, those are tax draws that were not needed to be taken out of the company, which means that that is additional capital remaining in the company. And that is exactly what happened with my client. The first year, it was great. Didn't know that we could have a 50% tax deduction right out of the gate, and then on top of that 50%, we could then stack additional deductions. So that's fantastic. That capital that remained in the business did exactly that. It remained in the business. It put the business in a much better cash position the following year. That same cash position, that they were able to decide to do one of 2 things. We could either cash flow or partially cash flow our projects, or we could wait another year and we could leverage on lending. We could leverage for much larger loans. We could leverage for much better interest rates. The company has grown substantially. Like I said, we were around number 10, number 11 as far as size. Today we are the largest residential home builder that is based in Alabama. For the community, what does that mean? Because we know what it means for the principals, right? We know what that means for the high income earners. But for those individual communities, for all of the subcontractors that have jobs, because of the additional projects that this company is able to pay cash for. They're not going out financing the raw vacant land, right? We talked about that earlier and what a risky decision that is, we don't actually know because we've not built the first piece of infrastructure there. We've not built the first building. We're going out buying raw pieces of land. How in the world do we finance it? We don't even worry about it. We just write a check. Now we write a check. Then when it's time to begin building, well, we have decisions, right? We have options. Now we can either choose to finance or we can, again, just write a check. And as we do this, we see for the business purposes that we continue to preserve capital in a way that we could not possibly have preserved capital previously, because that deduction is not there. It's not available for the company. But if we can get each of the principals to agree, then from a business perspective, we can make a decision that is the decision that is best for the business and best for the principals individually. But just like I said, all of those subcontractors who now have jobs, exactly, they now have jobs. The company is employing hundreds of workers. Hundreds of jobs have been created and supported based on this process of conserving property and preserving capital over the last 6 years. All of the companies that provide the materials are being supported. You think of all of the local companies that are supported, all of the families that are supported, all of the small businesses that support the development that otherwise was unavailable due to restrictions in financing that is now available, has poised Alabama for incredible growth. It just so happens, not that I have anything to do with it, sometimes you're just in the right place at the right time. But it just so happens that NASA and Space Force are relocating to Huntsville, Alabama. Any space nerds in here? A little bit. Well, guess where we're buying property? Huntsville, Alabama. Guess where we'll be building homes for all of the businesses and all of those folks that are supporting the industries surrounding those organizations? Huntsville, Alabama. We have provided an opportunity, knowing and understanding that housing is one of the limitations to development. We have been able to provide that by identifying properties for conservation that would have otherwise been developed. It's a very strange dynamic to think that what we're actually doing is we're going out and we're identifying undervalued properties, we're placing restrictions on these properties, and we're promising that they will never be developed, ever. However, we can do this in an environmentally friendly way in areas that have a high environmental and ecological value, and we can do it in such a way that both we and the generations to come, in the exact same way that we are able to enjoy national parks, can enjoy these areas that are privately conserved. And we can do it at a price point that would be totally and completely unavailable to the government today. Just to remind you, today, under the National Park Service, we're managing 85 million acres at an annual budget price of $4.4 billion. Real estate prices are such that that is not available in the public sector anymore. However, it is available in the private sector, and that's what we are providing.